The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of societal and economic challenges it would pose. The Event 201 scenario is fictional, but it's based on public health principles, epidemiologic modeling, and assessment of past outbreaks. In other words, we've created a pandemic that could realistically occur. You will be seeing the same news videos and briefings as we do here in New York.
CAPS is a novel coronavirus related to those viruses that caused the frightening SARS epidemic in 2003 and the deadly MERS outbreaks in recent years. Some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in a hospital. Alarmingly, those people are able to walk around and spread the virus, not realizing they are doing so. It could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere. Models developed by leading public health authorities indicate a CAPS pandemic could lead to an outcome worse than the 1918 influenza, which killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society. The board's recommendations are aimed at top decision makers in national governments, global business, and international organizations. This board has been urgently convened by the World Economic Forum, and Johns Hopkins has been asked to moderate the board meetings and provide expertise during the board's deliberations.
Because there's misinformation and there's some belief. People believe, this is a man-made, some pharmaceutical company made the virus. When I was in Sierra Leone, and I was interviewed by radio, the national radio, I was asked by one of the audience to say, okay, we believe Ebola was man-made. It's transported from, somewhere. So I think this is very important. We do the TOT. So make sure the healthcare workers have the right information.
People trust less and less what comes from government. They're actually enabling many sources of information, Google, Facebook, the free-to-air media networks, ensuring that they are equipped, companies who will talk to their staff. And we know that very often these days people believe much more something that will come from their company than they will believe something that comes from government.
I think that there is an important role for government to not make a bad situation worse. And that is largely going to be communicating valid and trusted information about where the problem is so that people can make their own decisions.
But one thing we haven't spoken about, and I'm wondering whether it's time to talk about this, is a step up from the part of the governments on enforcement actions against fake news, right? Some of us, these new regulations that come in place about how we deal with fake news. And maybe this is a time for us to showcase some cases where we are able to bring forward some bad actors and leave it before the courts to decide whether they have actually spread some fake news.
There's likely to be significant amount of other forms of security unrest, essentially, that can be concerning. And that can come in the form of, terrorist groups or others taking advantage of the situation, but it can also come in the form of, famines. And as a consequence, we're going to want to be able to make sure that we actually have the infrastructure in place to deliver the kind of assistance that we need in these different areas across the board so that we can actually continue to manage the situation, not just economically, but political instability and violence that might outbreak as a consequence as well.
Something about what I said about science-based information earlier. Obviously, we are living in the 21st century, so we need to build up the capacity and the facilities. Once you have ZMapp-like antibodies or antivirals, I think you will restore the confidence of the public. So this is our stance. We put that one to say, unite together under the WHO, put for some pharmaceutical companies to have the capacity or facility to get prepared.
When so much of the funding for the hospitals go towards combating this specific disease, we can't forget that there are going to be patients that are impacted by other diseases who would have otherwise lived, received the care they needed, they would be in the ICUs that they need to be in.
Who are saying that
globalism is responsible for this pandemic, and therefore there's a rising protectionist nature to take care of their own. And so I think it's an instance where the business, health, and scientific communities need to combat that rising rhetoric and misleading information.
In a situation like this, many of our competitors would have been gone for the time being. They will be on ground. They will not be able to continue business. And also a major group like Lufthansa Group will be heavily affected. And we depend on governmental support now to be ready for a time after this.
And all of us here are from large companies, but in an increasingly globalized world, how do we bring the small and medium-sized enterprises along with us? And I think maybe we didn't speak about that enough today. How do we build capacity in small and medium-sized enterprises that they need to have some of these plans? And I think, to your question, financing is definitely going to be an issue, right? Because you need to set aside resources.